Today we're going to be talking about picking different qualities of hay and what you need to be looking for when buying for your animals. I have a couple varieties of hay here for you to look at. This is first cutting orchard grass alfalfa. This right here is second cutting orchard alfalfa hay. This right here is also some second cutting orchard alfalfa. And this right here is second cutting orchard alfalfa, but mostly alfalfa. So depending on what animal you're feeding is really going to dictate what kind of hay you buy. There's a lot of different animals that eat hay. There's all of your bovine breeds, cows, beef cows, that sort of thing. Horses is a huge one. You also got sheep and even guinea pigs, as well as goats and some other animals that I can't really think of off the top of my head. If you're feeding horses, the big thing you have to be looking for is dry. No mold, no must, none of that bad stuff. It's gotta be good, dry, sound hay. This hay here is good, dry, sound hay. You walk up here, good crunchiness. You can give it a smell, smells good. And even by the looks of it, it is good and green. There's not a whole lot of discoloration. This hay here, even though it is not good and green, it is still sound horse hay because it is dry. Now, it got sun bleach on it from sitting out in the windrow too long, but there is feed quality in here because there is some green stuff, but not as much feed quality as, say, that hay back there. Again, the big thing about this hay is it is dry. It may not necessarily be your top quality racehorse feed, but it will feed fine, it will do your horses good, and you're not gonna give your horse colic or any sort of respiratory disease. On the flip side, this hay right here are some bad bales that I picked out of one of the stacks that I had. This stuff is dusty. It's not really necessarily moldy, but it does have malburn on it, and there's some floor bales, and it's just not great stuff. This hay is the same hay, the same cutting as that hay back in the corner. That's your basis of like, that's good hay. If you feed this to your horses, they may be at risk of getting colic or some sort of respiratory disease. Now, it's pretty easy to tell good hay from bad hay. Again, first is the color, more so the consistency of color. Like that hay over there looks like straw. It's all consistently kind of brown, but that's because it's dry. This hay here is inconsistent green and brown, and you can tell by kind of the hardness of some of these bales, like the stuff just, you can tell by looking at it, it is not premium hay. One of the big giveaways about bad hay is the smell, especially alfalfa, because good alfalfa smells sweet. Like you sniff it and you're like, that is good. That stuff, you smell it and it almost smells bitter. That's how you know this ain't good horse hay. If we take a look at this hay back here again, this is premium alfalfa orchard hay. This is what you could classify as racehorse feed. I do sell this to a horse farmer that has race horses, and this is some premium stuff, and it is high dollar hay. Now, sheep are kind of the same as horses. They can't have hay that has, mold or must in them. I don't necessarily know if they get the same diseases, but they do not like moldy or musty hay. So if you're buying hay for your sheep, know that you need to get some good sound hay as well. Again, this hay will work perfectly fine. It's not high in feed value just because it got sun bleached, so that's why it looks like straw, but there is good hay in here and it is good sound and dry. This is gonna be cheaper because it is not as high in feed value. This hay is gonna be a lot more expensive because it's much higher in feed value. Again, keep that in mind when you're shopping for hay, whether it's for horses or for sheep. Now, if you have cows, specifically beef cows, they will eat about anything under the sun. Example A, this hay here is first cutting hay that I made, and it got baled around the 30% mark. Honestly, for being around 30%, 20-30%, I put some preservative on it. It actually turned out to be pretty decent hay, but there are definitely some bales in here that are really crappy. And it ain't horse hay because it is quite dusty, if you can't tell, but they gobble it up like it's candy. So it don't matter what kind of hay you put in front of them, they will gobble it up and be so thankful and grateful for every little bit of hay you give them. They will just love you to death. That's why we have steers. As a hay farm, you are bound to make some bad hay no matter how hard you try to make good hay. And this is kind of one of those examples of bad hay. Even though this is terrible horse hay and it will not feed to a horse whatsoever, it is going to be absolutely phenomenal steer hay because they can eat moldy or musty hay, no problem. They won't get diseases. And the big thing is this stuff is loaded with alfalfa. Hay's not supposed to sound like that though. Regardless, they're going to gobble this stuff up because it's loaded with alfalfa, and to them it is sweet and sugary. Regardless of whether it is moldy or musty, they're going to gobble it up and put on plenty of pounds of beef, and they are going to taste so delicious in my stomach, make my mouth water. So keep all that in mind when you're shopping for horse hay or sheep hay or steer hay. Horses and sheep particularly have to have good sound hay, no mold or must. cows, beef, and even goats can pretty much eat anything under the sun and they won't have any problems with it. Now, obviously, when you're shopping for good sound hay, you're gonna pay more for it because good sound hay is gonna bring more money than bad hay. If you have horses or sheep, be prepared to pay a little bit more for your hay. If you have cows or beef or goats, you can kind of get away with anything. You could go to auction or even to a farmer and say, what do you have for poor quality hay, and get it really cheap. Oftentimes farmers struggle to get rid of some of that bad hay and they end up taking it to auction, and you can get it for a pretty cheap price there. So thank you for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you want to follow along and watch more of this kind of content, hit that subscribe button. And if you have any questions or future video ideas, leave a comment down below. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one.